And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart in New Jersey's own Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir.
Blake, yesterday, of course, another crazy week of college football. You and I were just talking about this. I don't want to sit here and play the whole hypothetical situation game because it gets very convoluted. But after yesterday,
you're talking about conference tiebreakers. Is that what you're talking about here?
Yeah, I don't want to get into the tiebreakers, but I just want to point out here, I don't think outside of Oregon, and I don't even think it's been solidified for the Big Ten, I don't think there is a single conference that has been decided on who is going to be the winner. And I can't remember the last time that that's happened. Can you remember the last time that all four power conferences, the past obviously five, that we couldn't sit here and name and pinpoint this team is and feels like a lock to win it? That's where we're at the current moment.
Can I be real with you?
Okay.
Last year,
I
didn't know who was going to win the SEC. I felt like Georgia was a little too flawed. Remember, we had talked about that, even though, and then Bama goes in there and beats them.
Well, the only one I disagree on is the ACC we knew. And the Big 12, we knew that Texas was going to win.
At the last month, we didn't know when Jordan Travis went down. We kept thinking that they might get clipped by Louisville, that they might get clipped by somebody. So even then, you had speculation. By the way, SMU leads the ACC right now.
Right. But you would agree with me, though, that at this season, right now,
what you're trying to say, 2007 is the answer that you're looking for.
Right. There's never been this many teams that are in the running for all of these conferences, especially the SEC and the Big Ten. There's 4 or 5 that could be talked about for the Big Ten. There's 7 or 8 that we were just talking about before we went live that are in play for the SEC. The Big 12 has 3 or 4 teams that are currently in the mix, and the ACC as well is probably more like 2, but it's chaotic, and I like it. I'm here for it. I think it makes our jobs a little bit easier because there's more shit to talk about, but it is fantastic theater that we're getting to this point.
Yeah, so we'll go through Miami and Georgia Tech. Miami got upset yesterday. Wait a minute. Didn't somebody on this show say if you keep playing around the way that you're playing around, you're going to lose? And then somebody else on this show said, Blake, they're last year's Washington. And I said, no. You can't do this. Was that on the show?
Just because they lost does not mean that they're not last year's Washington. They're the most reminiscent to Washington out of any team.
No, they're not last year's Washington. They're not.
I still stand by that.
Well, no, because Washington never got physically bullied like this into the playoff. Yesterday, Miami got physically bullied.
I never said it was a direct one-to-one comparison where every single thing lines up. But to the degree of where their defense does not match the level of play of their offense and they rely on outscoring teams, that's still true. It's just Miami got caught up. And I'm not looking forward to that second. It's one of the few times I'm not looking forward to.
Here's what happened yesterday. Can we talk about what happened yesterday? Because it also happened in the second game that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Georgia got out physical by Ole Miss. LSU got out physical and dominated by Alabama. So the 3 premier games that we're going to talk about here, Miami got dominated, LSU got dominated, Georgia got dominated. So the first 3 games that we lead off here, Joe, the teams that are spending this money in the portal to get linemen, it's kind of paying off a little bit here.
I think one thing that we've really learned, and there's not enough time of a sample size to really know what works and doesn't work in the transfer portal. Defensive line is the one position group that you can 1,000% build through the transfer portal. Colorado is another great example where if you watch the Texas Tech game,
we'll talk about that tonight too.
Yeah, they were all over Texas Tech with the pressures that they were able to produce in that game. It was like a snap-to-snap basis. If it wasn't for the fact that they were running a ton of light boxes, Taj Brooks wouldn't have had the game that he did in the second half. He was completely shut down in the first half. So that is one thing we've learned. You can't build an offensive line through the portal, and that's something that'll be unpacked in the offseason. But right now, we can all say here, these teams that were aggressive in trying to go get D linemen this offseason, it's starting to pay dividends. Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's no bigger reminiscence than Florida State last year and then Ole Miss this year. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because and look, we got to talk about Florida State here at the end. They fired a lot of their offensive staff. We'll get to that too.
Yep.
But you talk about Colorado. Colorado had 7 sacks yesterday. We'll get to their victory versus Texas Tech. By the way, a 7-point game with a minute left to go. People I see it all over social media. Thank you for confirming to me that you didn't watch the game or weren't watching the game. It was a 7-point game with a minute left to go. I think everybody needs to calm down about, they handily beat Texas Tech. No, they didn't. No, they did not. So we'll get to that as well. And then we'll get, Joe, there's a lot we got to get to in the rest of week 11. Texas looks really good against Florida. How much do you take away from that? And BYU saved by the Mormon Bell.
That game, I don't know if you were up watching it. I was not. I went to bed. I did not have the stomach.
I was on a post game until 1 a.m. And then I had a 2 hour and 45-minute show last night to talk about where LSU is as a program. By the way, I didn't go to bed till like 1:30, 2 o'clock. So and listen, I texted you this specifically for LSU, but it's gonna, because I'm pissed off, it's gonna go to other teams. Gloves come off today. So the Blake that everybody loves, where all these great clips come from, gloves come off today. That's the one that you're going to get. So, Joe, you just need to sit there and let me get it out, because I got some venting I got to do, because this is my therapy.
I will let you do that. And I'm glad that you're not going to, and we're not going to sit here and do
gloves
this bit where I'm just telling you right now, I was ready to, and we were texting about this morning. I was ready to just go guns blazing about Brian Kelly. Like I didn't care if you were going to get upset at me or not. I was pretty critical in any opportunity that I had on Twitter yesterday, and anytime I was talking to people yesterday, to be critical of Brian Kelly, because he's living up to everything that I've been saying about him. I'm glad that you're not going to sit here and push back on me on this, and I'm glad that we're, I think, on the same page. I think. Well, I guess we don't know what we're going to say here, but I think we're on the same page.
If you're calling for him to be fired, number one, it's unrealistic at the current moment.
I'm not doing that yet.
But here's the ironic truth. You ready? If they win out, they'll still have it be 2 losses in the conference, and there will be a 7-way place tie in the SEC. So, again, as crazy as it sounds, but yeah, you can do that. All right, let's get rolling. No super chats, it doesn't appear. Elks must be in hiding after beating Purdue the way that they did. Oh, but guess what I'm going to do after tonight's show? Miami fans better be ready. They better be y'all talk so much shit. Joe, name somebody who took more shit over a 10-week span than I did on Miami fans. You can't.
Well, actually, by the way, you weren't the only person. I mean, there's been plenty of other people that have been as critical as you are about Miami that were also getting flack. Miami fans are just very aggressive. I had them rallying behind me.
No, but calm down on the cocaine. Calm down on the cocaine.
All right, come on. You're just trying to piss them off.
Okay, well, all right. Let's get to it. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share. If you're on Facebook, share to all those groups and social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell. Wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. Let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, Joe and I break down Week 11 in college football. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events, with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. All right, let's get to it. Joey Soroff in Coral Gables, as there was a big-time upset. Georgia Tech takes down the Miami Hurricanes. Your thoughts on this game?
Look, yes, you were correct about what you talked about.
Wait, can you say that again so I can hear it again, please?
No, you get one. A lot of what you talked about leading into this game, yes, it was true. There was no denying that they were giving up a lot of big plays. Their secondary, outside of a couple of players, were susceptible to getting beaten coverage. There were a lot of issues. What did not go Miami's way in this game, which was really unexpected. Miami's defensive line coming into this game was one of the best in the country. Statistically, against the run, they were extremely stout. They got completely ran all over Blake in this game. And that was what led to the upset. That was what opened up so many things. They gave up 271 rushing yards, which is the complete opposite of what they were averaging to this point. I think it was like 95 or something coming into the game, what they had averaged. It was under 100. But you were correct in saying that eventually they were going to get caught up. They were, to a point that I had made, and I'm going to get to something later after you go in your rant. But the points that we made and Miami fans made about Miami and what they were capable of, they're always in a football game. They tried to climb back. They almost kind of did, and they didn't. They couldn't get it done. The luck ran out. All of the hopes and dreams of them going undefeated this year, they're done. They're kaput because all of that luck that was helping them get through these games previously did eventually run out. I thought it was going to run out in the playoff. I didn't think it was going to come this soon, nor did I think it was going to be against Georgia Tech. But I guess Brent Key just hates Mario Cristobal enough to will this victory into existence.
Yeah, Brent Key does owe Miami at the current moment. But, Joe, I told you this. You know how I know that this catches up with you at some point? That dude behind me. On the audio podcast, I'm pointing to a mural of Burrow.
Yeah.
Joe, I don't care how good you are offensively. At some point, you're going to be off. At some point, there's going to be a game where you meet a team that's very physical and can push you around. And here's the truth. You got pushed around. You had no answer for Haynes King. And you know what they kept doing? Nickel and diming you all the way down the field with Haynes King. Joe, they didn't even really get Haynes involved early like I thought that they would. By the way, it's more embarrassing that you were giving that up on the ground because to throw the football, they're bringing in a true freshman, Joe, a true freshman in the game to complete passes on third down. He gets a big one on third down that ultimately leads to Georgia Tech winning the football game. But the bottom line is you got to take points too. Think about this. Joe, in the last 15 minutes of the game, so the fourth quarter, Miami had a turnover on downs. Georgia Tech goes right down the field and scores and whips that ass on that drive. Miami, with arguably the Heisman frontrunner, gets a touchdown, but then Georgia Tech then forces they get a punt. Georgia Tech forces a turnover on downs, and they come right back down the field and score on you. So every time that Georgia Tech, I don't want to take anything away from them. There's no way I'm taking away anything from Georgia Tech. When you can go
a great game.
When you can go up against a top 5 team and physically push them around with that talent at Miami, Joe, they're building. They've been hurt. They don't have depth. They're building. But, Joe, what have we seen from Georgia Tech all year? If you want to line up and play bully ball against them, they are the worst team in the country to do that against because you play right into their hands. Here's another thing. I've been telling you for weeks that I love Shannon Dawson. He has a soft spot in my heart, and you know why. Okay, but the bottom line is with Miami, not only did you get out physical, not only did they run all over you, they kept the ball away from you. I warned you that if you don't run the football in these types of situations and play a little bit of keep away so your defense can regroup, bad shit's going to happen to you. And by the way, it was always inevitable. This is always inevitable with a team that can't find a way to separate. It's a big thing about culture and chemistry when you have a lot of guys in from the portal that you can't find ways to separate. And they couldn't find ways to separate. Joe, at the very end, Cam Ward's trying to make a play. God bless his soul. Okay, but they rushed three, and they got home for a strip sack. That's also unacceptable. Miami reminds me of a team, okay? They remind me of the Warriors. I told you this last Tuesday or Monday when we talked about them.
No. Hold on a second. I said that they play 3-point basketball, and you shot that down. You shot that down. But continue what you were going to say. You shot that down. You shot that down when I say that.
The Warriors. Curry doesn't play defense, and Joe, neither does Miami. I don't think we fully understand.
They're actually more never mind. I was going to be really nitpicky.
Regardless.
They're more like that Rockets team with James Harden, where they never played any defense. But continue what you were saying.
Okay, fine. But they got bullied. And this is what I was trying to tell Miami fans, that if you keep doing this, eventually it will catch up to you. Joe, I mean, I retweeted everybody. I was getting called out all week. Now, I want to say this too. If you still have a strong chance to win the ACC and make a playoff. Joe, if you think that you're not going to go up against a more physical team than what you faced on Saturday, and that's the biggest issue here. Because now I know, and teams know, Joe, Alabama with Milroe and the physicality that they showed this week, Ole Miss with the physicality that they showed this week. Now you're in a very bad spot, because I know that you can be out physical. Joe, I got to give a hat tip of the week. I never do this. Haynes King, that's what you call a dude. Dude was hurt. He couldn't throw, and he lined up and whipped your ass all night long. And there wasn't a damn thing that you can do about it. You played soft. And, Joe, they had been playing soft defensively, and it caught up to them.
This is going to take that you're not going to like, and it's one that's similar to what J.D. Piquel had yesterday that a lot of people were
I didn't see it.
criticizing. It a bit spin zone-ish, but I agree with JD for what he said. This is a rallying point for Miami. This 1,000% is just like it was for Alabama, where when they lost to Vanderbilt, they lost the game to Tennessee. You got beat after surviving by such close margins. You hung in and barely won a bunch of games that many thought that you should not have won. You finally face somebody who is made to be your match. And like you just talked about there, out-physicaled them. This is the rallying point if you're Mario Cristobal, if you're Miami, to look yourself in the mirror and acknowledge, we can't do that shit ever again. We have to come out focused and locked in at the start of the game. We can't start slow because at any moment we can get popped by an opponent that is willing to fight all four quarters.
Can I stop you?
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
got to call BS on that, because at what point, if you not being in close games and almost losing to Virginia Tech didn't give you a reality check?
Wait.
Losses do not give you reality checks.
No, yes, they do. Okay, losses do give reality checks. That's a very important thing.
In this context, they lost a game and a call got overturned. Virginia Tech should have been their reality call.
Okay, let me finish what I was trying to say. They didn't have that same perspective after this type of a game and it was clearly painted in the way that the comments that we have seen from Miami fans and the commentary that I had as well, that they were able to win in this manner, that there was just a natural belief. And you could tell by the way that they were playing that there was a natural belief that they could just hang around in games and then eventually score when they needed to and finish off the football game.
They felt like Cam Ward would bail them out.
But that's what I'm saying, is that there was always that belief that, like, no matter what, oh yeah, we'll get back into it. This is the game where that doesn't come to fruition. This is the reality check of realizing, hey, we can't start slow. We have to be focused. I think that this goes on to help Miami. And I know plenty of people are going to probably roll their eyes at that and groan and say, are you kidding me after a loss like that? And you're finding a way to spin this and push Miami forward. I think if Mario Cristobal is good of a coach as he's been advertised at times, is going to use this as a chance for this team to take a step forward and play better. But I don't know.
Okay. Here's the truth. Everything that you said can happen. It 1,000% can happen. Let's get back to this reality. I don't think that they can fix the blown coverages, even though Georgia Tech did not throw the ball on them. Haynes King was 6 for 6, Joe, for 32 yards. The other kid comes in and completes 2 third downs in the fourth quarter, throwing the football on 3rd or 8+. They are still getting lost. So you're right. It can be a rallying cry from not being out physical. But I miss me with that they have not been trying to fix them getting lost in man-to-man coverage. Joe,
I'm not saying that they haven't been trying to address that.
I get it. I'm just not, like I've been saying from the beginning, I can't go there with you, because I don't think that they're a very physical football team. They want to play finesse football when they have physicality as their weapon. Like if they would have lined up yesterday, which I've been screaming, and you have too, the only thing that we agree about them, give the football to Damian Martinez and get out of the way. Get out of the way. When you get in tough physical battles, you got to break opponents. Joe, fundamentals of football have not changed. When you have a running back like him and can do what he's doing, you better go smack somebody in the mouth. Mario Cristobal comes from a system with Saban that they lined up and punched you in the mouth. You're an offensive line coach. You cannot allow Shannon, who I love, you cannot allow him to continue to throw the football when you're running the ball at 6.8 yards per carry. Joe, they were lining it up in the second half and bopping Georgia Tech right in the mouth. Who's the kid number 44, by the way? The linebacker from Georgia Tech. What's his name? Embody?
Effort.
Okay.
Kyle Effort.
He came out of the game in the second half 3 times. 3 times in the second half. Joe, they put a brand new linebacker in the game, and they didn't run right at him. They think that they're good enough to do what they do. But sometimes when you have a dude like that with an offensive line like that, Joe, the time of possession became a big deal at the end. A massive deal.
It did. And this is what I'm talking about, though, is this is where they finally let the game get away from them. This is what you're talking about, where you pull up the film, you break down that film, you as a coaching staff, you as a roster, understand that is the back end of the spectrum of how you can play. That was obviously the worst game that they've played this year.
I don't think
it is.
Game. I don't think it is.
What else would be the worst game that they've played?
I think Cal is worse. Offensively in the
I don't know. You can say that when they had an insane comeback in the fourth quarter.
Joe, they're letting average athletes outrun them. That's the problem. Here's the thing with Georgia Tech.
I don't think that there's a higher level of athlete at Georgia Tech than there is at Cal. I think they're pretty evenly matched athletically. I think one team's just better coached than the other.
No, they're not, especially not on the outside. Georgia Tech just lined it up and ran it right at you, Joe. They couldn't throw the football. They were the one-dimensional Paul Johnson team that was smiling.
Okay.
Paul Johnson loved what he just saw. Again, if you think that you're not going to get out physical again in this season, you're damn wrong.
Well, okay, again, this is my whole point though that I'm trying to get at here. You're making the point, and I understand the point that you're making. But and this is all comes down to like what kind of a coach is Mario Cristobal? Does he take this as tangible evidence of like we have to play more physically, we have to run the ball harder, we need to go out, we can't get out of a game with 0 sacks?
Name a time in Mario Cristobal's career that he's been able to overcome that, because he couldn't do it at Oregon, and now you're asking him to do it at Miami. And what I'm saying is what I'm seeing from Oregon to Miami. When it going gets tough and there's a team that can out physical you, Cristobal teams fold.
Mario Cristobal we need to remind ourselves, though, hasn't been a head coach for that long. He's 54 years old. He was a head coach at Oregon.
FIU, what are you talking about? He's been a head coach for over 10 years.
I mean, that's not as long in the grand scheme of things.
That's a long time to be a head coach. Hold on. Brand new head coach.
Okay, first of all, none of us were paying attention when he was a head coach at FIU to know any of the context of what it was like when he was at FIU.
No, but I saw him at Oregon go against an Auburn team and get pushed around.
He was
by the way, the Auburn team went 7-5.
3 years when he was at Oregon, and he's been the coach for 3 years here at Miami. I am just saying that there have been plenty of coaches in their coaching careers where they have eventually gotten over the hump, gotten over their issues. I mean, was that not the hope with, and I don't mean to do this. Was that not the hope with Brian Kelly when you hire Brian Kelly, that he gets over the hump and he actually starts to win the big games? And I know that we're going to save that for later, but that's the assumption, that is eventually a coach gets past their complications, whatever's holding them back.
You're comparing apples to oranges when one coach has been in the playoff multiple times and made it to a national championship game versus a guy that had an Oregon team with a quarterback like Justin Herbert and got beat by Auburn, Joseph.
Okay.
I mean, you can spin this however you want, but I promise you this, as God is my witness, it's good. This is going to happen again. They are not as good defensively as we think that they are. in the interior of that defensive line, the God's honest truth was yesterday and in other parts of the season, they have gotten their shit pushed in. They have gotten their shit pushed in.
I don't agree with that because they have played in games this year, multiple games this year, and it's been extremely inconsistent, which has led to problems. They have played in multiple games this year where their defensive line has played.
What are you trying to defend with Miami?
I'm just trying to defend that there's still life to this team. Like they played like shit, and there's an opportunity for them to bounce back. That's all I'm trying to say here.
There it is. They are elite offensively. I can make the argument that this would be. Again, I'm not going to try to compare conferences. I'm not going to do that again because it just leads down another rabbit hole. But the bottom line is who we think that they are is not who they actually are outside of Cam Ward.
I don't like the phrasing in that because I think it implies that they're overrated.
You're
I don't think that they are.
But you know it's true.
No, I don't know. I don't think that that's true.
Okay. Line up against any one of these teams that have 2 losses right now and tell me that they wouldn't out physical Miami. You know that you're a damn lie. You know you're a lie. So
a good chunk of them would.
Joe, I can name 7 teams right now that can line up and out physical them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't think that's that big of a number, though.
Okay, so again, if we're trying to fight over the semantics of them,
all right,
I don't know. All right. Okay. You know another team that really outshowed their physicality yesterday.
Who's that?
The Ole Miss Rebels take down the Georgia Bulldogs in what was an alt-right physical game by Ole Miss. Joe, I gotta throw this out there. After the game last year with Lane Kiffin and he loses to Georgia, Lane goes to the podium and says, and I quote, "We have to have better dudes up front," end quote. And then all of a sudden they go through the portal and they go and get these freak of natures on the defensive line. And boy, did it pay off as Ole Miss clips the Georgia Bulldogs yesterday.
I know that we're going to get to Georgia, and I'd love to spend the beginning of this talking about Ole Miss here because I've been critical of Lane Kiffin, and they showed up in the truest way that they needed to. There was every reason for them to completely fall off the map here and fall out of the playoff picture. Their season was on the line, and Lane Kiffin not only had his defense ready to come out swinging, but stared down adversity at the beginning of this game when Jackson Dart went down in a disastrous first drive where everybody assumed that the game was over. Austin Simmons comes into the game, leads a scoring drive, and then Jackson Dart starts to have an incredible performance the minute that he recovers or is back from his injury. I give a ton of credit to Lane Kiffin, who I criticize for his inability to step up in these big games and for overthinking game plans. I saw a head coach, a play caller, that was in his bag throughout the entirety of this game. Ole Miss was not able to find success running the football, especially early. They were able to get a couple of yards here and there. But what they were able to do is to realize that if they attack the middle of the field and if they spread out that Georgia secondary, that they were going to be able to pick up some huge chunk plays. They were able to completely outrun that Georgia defense. And all the credit has to go to Lane Kiffin. It was a tremendous, tremendous performance.
Joe, offensively, I'll just say this. They did score 28. They weren't anemic, right? Like they weren't bad. But, man, I mean, that front seven absolutely dominated Georgia's offensive line. Joe, they had 5 sacks in the game. Jared Ivey had 2. Princely Human-Yellen, who we talked about a lot during the offseason, coming from Florida and going to Ole Miss, and then Perkins had a sack as well. By the way, Georgia could not run the football. They tried. They were trying to run the football. You know, the thing that everybody kept saying was about Georgia is that you need to establish the running game. But we talked about in our preview, and we said this might not be the game that you need to try to do this. Because if you're going to try to do this against Ole Miss, you're going to play right into their hands. Joe, Walter Nolan's not going to get the credit that he deserves because he doesn't have the stats. He dominated in that interior all night long. I don't know what the status of J.J. Pegues is, but when J.J. Pegues is in, Joe, they're putting a defensive tackle in at quarterback on short yardage situations and is converting critical downs. That's how talented this Ole Miss team is. They have finally, this isn't a finesse Ole Miss 10-win football team. This is an Ole Miss football team that, quite honestly, they can line up and dominate you. And, Joe, we talk about parity in college football. There is no more parity of seeing what Ole Miss just did to Georgia, because Ole Miss has never been able to get all of those dudes on that defensive line. Maybe a Robert Kimdichie or Patrick Willis way back in the day at linebacker, maybe. But the bottom line is now they got dudes. And, yes, they slipped up twice. But the defense in the front seven has been more consistent than anything all year. It's not the front seven's fault that they have lost at all, ever close. Joe, Lane Kiffin's back was up against the wall, and he responded. This was the one that he had to get, and he finally got it. I will say this too. Joe, they're finding a stride here, and I think Jackson Dart is arguably the most consistent quarterback in the SEC right now. And look, I hope the game ball.
Actually, not to cut you off. Not arguably, he is the most. I mean, he's played the best as a passer.
Hey, well, I mean, if we're going to go week in week basis, there have been games where Jalen Milroe has had negative yardage. So if we're going to talk about from a holistic style point, a holistic point of view here, okay, he's been more consistent throughout the entire season. I know Milroe did what he did yesterday. We'll get to that next.
Yeah.
But Austin Simmons deserves a game ball. Joey comes right in, ready, prepared to go, 5 for 6, 64 yards, leads the scoring drive. He ties the game after a bad first series for Ole Miss. And, Joey, it felt like from that point on, when you had Austin Simmons that came into the game, I'm like, you know what, man? They still might have a game. People were tweeting out after Jackson Dart came back, hey, man, are you sure that you don't want to leave this Simmons kid in? And Dart comes in and goes, not so fast, rookie. Not so fast. This is still my job. Joe, they're just really good, man. And you know Lane's going to find offense. If you give him enough time, he'll find enough. But it's got to be that Georgia was physically dominated on the offense or on offense. That's what led to this one.
The biggest takeaway is separate from all that, because that's all very important. This is the best game that we've seen. And I was listening to another show, the Cover 3 Pod, that's the CBS Sports podcast. They brought up this might be the best program win in program history. Like, this might be the biggest win that they've had.
It's not remotely close. Oh,
it's still up there.
Let me not say remotely close.
Yeah, it's still up there. This is a pretty big win for them.
They beat Bama.
Okay.
Like pinnacle Nick Saban Bama.
Right. Yeah. Right. This, though, and the biggest reason why I kind of partially agree with that is that it sets them up to be a lock to get in the playoff right now. Because right now they have 2 losses. They're probably not going to go to the SEC championship game because they're in the middle
of the game at home.
Right, they're in the middle of that kind of weird mix. They've got a bye week coming up, so they're going to have 2 losses to get into the playoff. And the final 2 games that they have are against Florida and Mississippi State. They get Mississippi State at home, and Florida is on the road. They are in the best position out of any team that I can think of, except for, maybe Oregon and Ohio State, and they've got to do their whole little dance where they face off with one another and blah, blah, blah. But I can't think of a team that isn't in the best possible pole position to get in the playoff, because they've got a great win. They've got a pretty good resume, and their worst loss is bad, but it's still at least a Power 4 loss, and it's not like Notre Dame's situation where their loss is to a G5 program. They're in a really, really good spot right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, they can beat you in many ways. And when you're that physical on your defensive line, Joe, again, you're going to – look, it's not even that they're stopping the run. Most defensive lines, Joe, that we talk about that are really good, they do one thing exceptionally well and maybe average in the other, right? Like, I mean, yeah, they can be a little leaky. Maybe they got some good edge guys or interior guys, whatever it may be. Joe, they're good everywhere. They lead the country in sacks. They're one of the best teams rush against the run. I mean, they're good everywhere. Chris Pupal is the best linebacker in the SEC. I am not listening to any other conversations. Yeah. He is everywhere. He might be undersized, but Joe, he is the most instinctual human being on the defensive side of the football that I've seen in the SEC all year. And that is with a lot of good defensive players in the SEC. But man, the bottom line here, Joe, they are dangerous and can be a national contender because of what they can do in their front seven. They're going to be in every game. I mean, maybe there's a situation where their defensive line is off. You know what? Again, what's the status of J.J. Pegues? I don't know. But here's what I do know. Joe, they're going to be a playoff team. And if you take this team lightly, God help you.
Now, the perspective that we got to get to here, though, Blake, is talking about what the hell do we make of what Georgia just did, because they played horribly. And there's a lot of things being called into question right now of, are they on the fringe? Are they on the fringe of getting into the playoff? I think they also, similar to what we're seeing here with Ole Miss, they have a lot of control in their future. They get to host Tennessee at home, and Nico is banged up at the current moment. We don't know what his health situation is.
That's a 9-point spread, by the way. Somebody knows something.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens there and if that ends up changing, but that is a very strong position. But for what went wrong, it is the ugliest marriage between Mike Bobo and Carson Beck. It is the both of them do not fit together. They're two complete opposite pieces that we're trying to shove together to get the work in unison. I watched one of the worst game plans and in-game decision-making situations on a snap-to-snap basis when I was trying to watch this offense. Defensively, what happened to them is a whole separate thing. They just got completely out-coached, out-schemed. They were not prepared to make the plays in space, but
I don't blame their defense at all, by the way. I will get to that. It's tough for what they went through.
Right. It's tough. It's tough with being on the field as much as they were and to have those drives stall out the way that they did for them not to be able to convert in the red zone. Their blockers were losing in one-on-one situations where they should not have been getting their asses kicked. We thought that Georgia's offensive line was supposed to be their strength. That is definitely not the case. We saw in this game what this Georgia offensive approach could be. There was one drive, I think it was the opening drive in the third quarter, where they started to attack all of Ole Miss's, the edges of their defense. They were running end arounds. They were running stretch plays, just trying to get to the outside, doing whatever they could to put the ball in space and get to the outside of the field. And they were moving the ball. And the minute that they stopped doing that, the drive stalled, they kicked the field goal, and then the rest of that game was history. They reverted back to what was not working. Bobo's the problem. I wouldn't be shocked at the end of this season if we're not talking about Mike Bobo being on the way out and them looking for a new offensive coordinator.
I'm not disagreeing with you there. Okay, I'm not trying to stick up for Bobo here. Hang with me, though.
Okay.
Carson Beck is a bad decision maker. He's a very bad decision maker.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I've come to the conclusion where I'm not going to defend him anymore. It's the both of them. Like the blame needs to go to both of them.
The only reason I'm putting it a little bit on Beck is it's not because of the play calling that you're throwing some of these interceptions. Some of these, Joe, is that he is confused or he's just making bad overall plays. Like the one he had yesterday, the ball kind of slips out of his hand a little bit. But even when you're down 7, okay, he's taking a sack, and he's got a wide open. I forget the kid's name. Smith. Smith runs a mesh route and is clapping his hands to pick up a first down. Like he's going ballistic. Get me the football. Joey throws the ball away, and they have to punt. That's not on Bobo. It's not.
Okay? And that's all over the film. When I watch the film, and when you get to look at the all 22 of like the way that he's played, which I hadn't done up until this point because of, I needed to see like what the hell is going through his field of view, what he's looking at. There are so many guys sprinkled all over the field, which I understand that the nuances of playing quarterback. We don't know what he's being coached to be his initial reads or not. There's so many complexities to it. But if he can't scan the field and he's so locked in on whoever he was originally planning to get the football to, that's where the problem is. He is not seeing the full field, and the plays are not being called in a manner that's going to set him up to succeed. It's just a mess.
Now, let me pause.
Yeah. Okay.
He is not the reason you lost this game yesterday.
It's not solely on him.
No, it's not on him at all.
Okay. I'm surprised that that's.
I got to be real with you. He's not even in my top 3 problems as to why did they lost against Ole Miss.
Okay.
Joe, you had 59 yards rushing. Tate Ratledge, who I know is coming back from injury, Jared Ivey pieced him apart all day long. There was an inside zone run where Ivey swim moves him and hits Etienne in the backfield. It's the very beginning of the game. Like, very beginning of the game. Joe, we're talking about inside zone. That is not a coordinator thing. It's not a core. If you can't run inside zone and your personnel's getting beat like that, your O-line's getting flat out whoop. Joe, we've seen less inferior or more inferior fronts go up against Ole Miss and moderately hold their own. Georgia got their asses flat out whipped. And it started in the interior, 59 yards rushing. Joe, they are highly unathletic at tackle. I mean, you got to give your quarterback time when you're trying to get the ball down the field. And legitimately, Ivy, Human Yellen, all of them, even Walter Nolan, like, they're not running the ball here. We're going to go after him. Then they get a strip sack. Look, we can blame a lot on Carson Beck. But when your offensive line is getting dominated like that, it's just not on him. And to be real with you, it's also not on Bobo, because Bobo's the easy scapegoat in all of this. He's the easy scapegoat. He did not – Kirby also, before Bobo got here, this is a recruiting thing on their offensive line. They're not good enough. They're not good enough.
See, there's the only multiple
teams. Oh, well, hold on one second.
No, finish what you're saying.
There
Yeah, go
have
ahead.
been multiple teams that have out-athleted them in the front.
The only thing that I partially disagree with that is I don't think that Georgia has done a poor job of recruiting an offensive line, and nor do I actually think that they've done a poor job at development as well. Like they're supposed to have, coming into this season, Fairchild and Tate Ratledge are supposed to be two top 150 quality draft picks. Jared Wilson
Tate Ratledge got his ass whooped yesterday, buddy.
He did, and he's coming off of an injury, so I give him a little bit of grace, but you're right. He should not be absolved of any blame. Jared Wilson, their starting center, is supposed to be a guy that is on the radar as a top center in the upcoming class.
He got his ass whooped yesterday, buddy.
He got his ass kicked. Monroe Freeling's a guy who's on the younger end that could be a guy who could turn into a quality draftable prospect. They have the guys. Who's their offensive line coach? That actually begs the question.
I don't even know. Need to hope Sam Pittman gets fired and go get him. And that's not happening. But look, man, I mean, Georgia's not the physical dominating team that we're accustomed to.
Stacy Searles.
I don't know who that is. They're not. Look, and here's the thing about them defensively, because you brought up their defense yesterday. Joe, what do you want them to do? They got you your first touchdown. They got an interception on your own side of the field, okay, and you go in and score. By the way, it took you 4th and goal to get in on the score, and that was your only drive that you really did anything. I mean, Joe, other than the field goal that they got, they could not move the football. They were absolutely abused yesterday. Abused. And so there comes a part where I look at their defense, Joe, there's nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing that I'm going to get on this defense about. Because when you're on the field for that long, that's a problem.
Yeah, the time of possession, I just had it pulled up. The time of possession in this game, 30. Oh, no, actually, Georgia won the time possession. Ignore what I was just going to say. But it was the context of the drives and the situations that they were in. And you're probably going to win time of possession with the style of play that you have compared to what Ole Miss does, because they move a lot quicker. But the way that they were attacking them eventually became so demoralizing to what you're talking about. It does not belong any blame on the defense. I think to contextualize everything that we're saying before we jump over to the next game, Blake, there should be a fear if you're a Georgia fan. Like, there legitimately should be a concern. I have tried to play the role of, whenever there's been a bad game for Georgia, to say there is room for improvement. Mm-hmm. I see problems that aren't fixable at the current moment. Unless there is, and I'm stunned. Like, I'm legitimately stunned by that performance that they had yesterday.
Finding your offensive line is not going to be easy this week.
Right. It's not something you do in November. It's the complete opposite. Teams that we were saying needed to figure their shit out have been doing it through the first 2 months of the season and getting slowly better.
About Tennessee.
Well, I know what you're saying. Well, I know what you're saying. It's both things. You're not going to figure it out this late in the season. You're also not going to figure out when you're banged up and you've got guys coming off of injuries, and you're also not going to do it against Tennessee with a really talented group that's been kicking the crap out of everybody.
Now you know why Mike Bobo hasn't really been running the football.
I slightly still disagree with that. I know that some people don't love the whole EPA conversation, which is expected points added, meaning success of plays. They were far better in EPA per rush than they were EPA per drop back. So they could have tried to run the ball more, and they could have tried to do what they were doing in the third quarter, which was checking the edges.
The problem is that my eyeballs saw their front interior offensive line get dominated, and that stat does not tell me that. So you're right. Okay, we're 1,000% right. That stat's probably a really good one. Until I saw Jared Ivey absolutely beat the dog shit out of Tate Ratledge yesterday and say, look, buddy, you're going up against a really good defensive front again this week, so good luck. Yeah. All right, let's get to LSU and Alabama. Joe, another physical domination game here. Alabama goes into Death Valley and dominates LSU. Your thoughts on the game? Here we go.
I want to let's get to Alabama. Let's get Alabama out of the way first. Let's talk about Alabama and give them their flowers for the performance that they had. Blake.
Domination. Pure domination.
Complete domination. They completely outcoached LSU. We'll touch on that in a second. This was a perfectly schemed up performance. They knew that if they took Jalen Milroe and said, Jalen, go be yourself, man. Go play your ass off and just go take over this football game. There were some performances so far this year, and the Tennessee game is a perfect example of it, where it felt really clunky. But they knew that they were going to be able to out-athlete in space with Jalen Milroe compared to some of these linebackers and defensive linemen that LSU had that have been inconsistent, and their performances have been masked by a couple of good games that made us think that they were better than they actually were. Alabama played phenomenally. They're deserving of being back in the national championship relevance. Their problems are not completely fixed, but here is the absolutely biggest thing that needs to be brought up. When Alabama plays clean, strong football, and they're not making stupid, silly mistakes, they're not having a million turnovers, that is the version of them that can show up on a game-to-game basis. They can be one of the best teams in the country when they're not making a ton of silly, dumb mistakes. It's not a great number, but they only had 7 for 74. That's on the lower side of some of their bad performances for penalties.
And
they looked a lot
in the fourth quarter when the game was out of hand.
Right. This was one of the cleaner games that they've played. 42 points is something that you should aspire to have every single week and that they're capable of producing.
Here's the only thing I'd say. In the first half, I thought the game was a little bit closer, right? If LSU doesn't turn the ball over in the game, Joe, they had both times where they could have gotten themselves right back in the game, and they didn't. Not to take anything away from Alabama, they stopped them from doing that. Jalen Milroe looked healthier. Bye week clearly helped him. And, Joe, they saw, for what it's worth, to your part about Kalen DeBoer coming off of a bye week, he saw Ole Miss, he saw South Carolina, he saw USC, and he saw A&M. And he goes, well, shit. If everybody wants to be physical with them and that's how you beat LSU, well, you're damn right. That's what I'm going to do. And they dominated. Kalen DeBoer, for what it's worth, and Nick Sheridan. Look, man, they're offensive dudes. And they were like, we want to play some bully ball. I want to show that I can do this too against LSU. And they did it. Look, Jalen Milroe was your run game. I mean, look, Haynes and Miller could not really get a whole lot going yesterday. LSU pretty much contained them. I would have rather them contain Milroe versus the other two, but they couldn't do that because they got out-athleted. But the bye week, this is ironic, Joe. Now, they didn't have 2 losses last year. The LSU game for Alabama is where Jalen Milroe hit his stride last year and then took off, okay? Is that going to be what happens again this year? If you're going to commit and he's okay with running the way that he is, Joe, it doesn't matter. When you can go in there and out-physical some teams, you're going to win. Now, I look at the rest of their schedule, okay? I think they have Mercer and then Auburn and maybe somebody else in there. I forget who it is.
Yeah, let me pull it up.
But I'm pretty sure that they have Mercer this week.
Mercer, Oklahoma, Auburn. So there's no reason for them.
Welcome back to the playoff conversations, Alabama, right? I mean,
Auburn's at home too, by the way.
Right, and so here you go. Joe, they ran the ball for 311 yards. And that's how you have to take from it. I mean, defensively, they were able to get some turnovers. I don't know if that's them or Nussmeier necessarily, because Nuss has let everybody turn him over. But, man, you out-physicaled and dominated a team. And, look, it's always a big thing when you can go into Death Valley at night and get a victory. Kalen DeBoer answered a lot of questions yesterday where Brian Kelly couldn't.
And a lot of times, to final thought on Alabama before we jump to the inevitable criticism of Brian Kelly, a lot of the special seasons that Alabama has had, they have secured victories on the road at LSU. I like that. Having a win like that is a big momentum builder. Like, anyone who's an Alabama fan knows that if you're able to accomplish that in the hardest, this is the whole thing that we talked about in the preview. And this is the whole reason why we're about to light up Brian Kelly for the way that they played yesterday. If you're able to get a win on the road in the hardest place to play on the road, it is a rallying point. It 1000% can be a point for your team to get locked in and to finish the season strong. And I don't know off the top of my head where they fit in the SEC championship picture, but a playoff berth feels inevitable for them.
Yeah, I mean, they're right squarely in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're right.
That's similar to Ole Miss. Similar to Ole Miss. They're in a very
similar to Ole Miss. I mean, yeah.
I mean, Mercer's got a good defense, though. You guys better watch out. Mercer, I'm like not even joking. Mercer has a good defense. They actually do. They have the best defense in the FCS. It's not even a joke. But it obviously is. They're going to kick shit out of Mercer. Obviously, an Alabama fan's going to say that I'm an Alabama hater for saying that.
Yeah, because it's what you sound like. Last thing on Alabama here. Joe, Kalen DeBoer came in and played SEC football. Old school. They were 10 of 13 on third down. He goes, you know what, man? You know what wins in this league? Running the football. And it's exactly what he did against a team who, look, LSU wasn't completely horrible at stopping the run. Now they were against running quarterbacks. And they did exactly what LSU couldn't fix. And so it was what it was. All right. Inevitable time here. Your thoughts on LSU?
Blake, I've made this comment plenty of times before. I've tried to warn LSU fans about what Brian Kelly was as a coach. And whenever I've been not willing to give him a bounds of credit for beating a team like Arkansas, for those types of performances, it's been because that I know that Brian Kelly's the type of a coach that when you give him an easy hurdle, he'll get over it. He'll win the games that he's supposed to win. He'll find ways to make it seem like those victories over average teams are more than they are. But when you actually set up Brian Kelly for a game with the season on the line against a must-win, difficult opponent, he's not going to get the job done. I have watched it too many times when he was at Notre Dame, and all of that is going to leak into the way that he's coaching at LSU. I could have told you that 3 years ago, and I did try to tell people 3 years ago that this was going to happen. No matter the amount of resources, he is the type of coach that on a game-to-game preparation standpoint in these big spots, better coaches will out-prepare him, and it showed up in this game. It is inexcusable, Blake. Absolutely inexcusable for Brian Kelly at home at night to take on a first-time head coach from the West Coast to come into your house and to not only beat you. We're not sitting here talking about a 5-point loss or a 3-point loss or even a 10-point loss, but to get your ass kicked and ran all over is unacceptable. It's beyond unacceptable. I don't think he's getting fired. His buyout's enormous. You're married to him for a long period of time, most likely. But this is not what you signed up for. And this is not the type of play that gets you into the picture to win a national championship. And what I just said a second ago was very true when I watched this game back. I saw a team that comes off of a bye week and looked unprepared. They did not look like they were ready to play this game, Blake. I'm over talking about the guy because it constantly happens. He's always going to find a way to slip up, and this is the latest version of it.
He's got to answer those questions. I'm not going to sit here and defend him because he's got to answer those questions. The Cheez-It Bowl for LSU, for what it's worth, is not where you can be. Coaches have been fired because that's where they're getting. Here's the thing about Brian Kelly, at least at LSU so far. The last 2 games, they've given up well over 500 yards rushing. They've given up 276.5 yards per game in back-to-back losses on the ground. They don't have the athletes in the second level, and they don't have the athletes at safety. Now, the way they're going to spin it is that, well, we only came in here with 39 scholarship players. It doesn't matter. It's year 3. You've had more than enough time to be able to combat that, even with the portal. Joe, in the last 5 losses that LSU has, teams have run for 245.4 yards per game on them. Here's the truth. They are getting dominated in the running game because they're not a physical football team. They're a soft football team defensively. And until they can be better if they get better personnel, like everybody else. Clear. Well, Blake, everybody else. They don't have the dudes that they once had. And that's where they're getting beat. They're getting dominated in the line of scrimmage. Dominated. And it's not changing. They're getting dominated at the second level. It's not changing. They're getting dominated at safety. It's not changing. So Brian Kelly, you're right. He's got a lot he's got to figure out. It's not going to be acceptable here. It won't. And he admitted it last night in his postgame. Oh, well, it's not the standard of LSU. Yeah, you're right. It's not. And people will turn on your ass. So it would be one thing, Joe, at LSU, if you lose to Bama by 3, you lose to Bama by 10. You know what? They got you. You are who you are. But here's the truth. Letting Mike Denbrock walk out that door was the worst decision that you ever made. Not fighting for him the way that you should have. And look, here's the gloves coming off. Notre Dame did not finesse completely Denbrock away. The truth of it is that their culture and staff isn't great either. So the culture and staff is translating on the field. Secondly, I don't care what anybody tells me. Garrett Nussmeier turns the ball over too much. And until LSU finds a way to stop turning the ball over, you're going to continue to lose. You have 12 turnovers, with that being turnover on downs too, 12 turnovers in the last month. 12.
Can I bring something up that I texted you about that is going to make you feel even more frustrated? So,
no.
Again, I'm going to bring this up. They had 24 rushing attempts in this game. Understandably, when you're down as big as they were and you had to fight to get back into it, you have to throw the ball a shitload to try and come within striking distance. But 24 compared to 42. They were outperforming in their EPA per rush. They were in the 90th percentile on running downs. That means that every time that they handed the ball off, they were expecting, and if you watch the film, as soon as I was watching the film and I was seeing the run lanes that were being created and some of the plays that they were getting early on in the first quarter, I was wondering to myself, that number's got to be up there. That means that every time you're handing the ball off, there's an expectation that you're going to get a pretty decent chunk gain, and you're going to be converting those into first downs.
Well, you had a long 45-yard run, but to your point, you were still getting 4 or 5 yards per carry.
Yes.
So LSU could have came in the game running the football, and they didn't.
But the biggest part is that they were doing it in parts of the game, and they just abandoned it. And it's happened. It happened against Texas A&M. It keeps happening, and it can work for them, but they refuse to freaking do it.
They do refuse to do it. And when and the problem is when they feel like they're down and they're pressing to try to show that they can do something instead of just playing, instead of just doing exactly what they need to do.
Sloan is not a good play caller. Like he of the play callers that we've criticized, he is not a good play caller.
No, he is not.
Bad play caller. Terrible.
However, here's the argument that I would make, because I have seen the All-22 copy already on LSU. I'm going to push back on you on this. There's too many guys wide open for Garrett Nussmeier to be missing.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that part.
Way too many. So here's the part about you saying he's a bad play caller. The problem with that is you can't have that many people that are wide open and him missing and then say, well, he's a bad play caller. No, Nuss is preconceived of what he's doing before the snap comes. He's got it in his mind of what he's going to do. Joe, this is the second straight week where his first read, he doesn't even look at. He goes to a favorite target, and that's where he throws it. So the bottom line remains, he's not even going to his first target. So we can talk about Sloan all we want to.
Yeah.
And I'm with you on the style of the plays that he's calling. At the same time, I look at Garrett and say, yeah, you're not whoever. And look, I'm going to say this. The biggest thing LSU fans hate me for is not anointing him ever during his entire LSU career. It's been the thing that they've hated on me the most about is him. Bench Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels sucks. No, he didn't. Okay? He is not a gunslinger. He is a poor decision maker. And I am tired of hearing that label put on him. He's not a gunslinger. Can he make really good throws? Yes. Can he make borderline elite throws? Yes. But he has had some of the worst halves at quarterback that we have seen at LSU in a long, long time. Joe, here's the truth. Max Johnson was more efficient at LSU than Garrett Nussmeier was at the current moment.
That's crazy. To talk about what you just mentioned though a second ago, like with him staring down receivers, I almost clipped it and pulled it out, the play where it was in the third quarter and Deontay Lawson picked him off in the end zone.
Oh,
he could not have stared down his receiver any more than he did. And look, I don't like to be critical of players, like too critical, because these guys are still young men. And I don't think that you're crossing any line at all, by the way. There have been plenty of people the past couple weeks with Nussmeier that have been a little bit obnoxious with breaking him down.
Hold on one second.
I know.
To your point, he went below 50% against Ole Miss, and they made him the player of the week.
But right, this is where the problem comes in, is that there's been a lot of overhype for him, and we need to temper our expectations. He could be a great player.
He can.
He's got 2 more years of eligibility left. He's got all the tools to be like a really nice player.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
Okay, here's who I check.
He's got a massive arm, and I'm with you there. Outside of a massive arm, there's not a lot of accuracy. There's not a lot of good decision making.
There's not a lot of timing. There's not a lot of touch. Yeah,
timing's not there. Touch isn't there. Footwork's not there. Please miss me on that. He's got a lot of traits. No, he does not.
He could. I'm surprised that you're more critical of him than I am.
No,
because I've been saying a lot of that stuff. I've been saying a lot of that stuff, and I thought I was being negative.
If there were anybody else in the country that was doing what he was doing at a program like LSU, he would be getting hammered. You know who his name is, by the way? It's Carson Beck.
Right. So, okay, here's what I was going to say, though. He's probably better off. I mean, I hate to tell a kid to get in the portal, but he's on this Kyle McCord trajectory where he's probably better off.
Oh, he's never leaving. They're never pulling the string on him. Never going to happen.
That's really stupid if that's the case. But he could end up like Bo Nix. He could end up somewhere in a completely different setting, in a completely different part of the country, and him getting his confidence back. But he does not look good enough to be a starting quarterback for a team competing for an SEC title.
You're right on this. When he's on, he's on. So you know that he has it in there. Okay, you know that he has that type of eliteness that can be there. The problem is he is a massively bad decision maker. Look, LSU has Florida Vandy, and then they have Oklahoma. Joe, you got to prove it to me. You as a team, I don't think you're a tough football team. I think you're a soft football team. So now you got to go out and prove it. Now you got to try to get to 10 wins again in a season. And I'm tired of saying, we have 10 wins, but doesn't matter anymore if you're not getting where you need to be. All right.
Right.
Let's get to the next game. Oh, speaking of playoffs, Colorado and Texas Tech. Joe, yesterday, the Buffaloes are able to hold on. They scored late, but 7-point game with 1 minute left to go. They do hold on and clip the Red Raiders.
Well, they've got a little bit of Washington in them the way that they play. I'm using that a little bit loosely these days with the comparisons where they're deep. They started a little bit slow. It took them a little bit to get going in the beginning of the game, but Dude, man, I get so mesmerized watching this offense play and see the big plays that they're able to produce. I mean, like Wester completely went off. Shepard had a couple of big plays. Travis Hunter, we know who he is already, had the big plays that we're used to seeing on a week-to-week basis. I really like watching this Colorado team. It's frustrating as heck because it feels like, and I thought that I jinxed them again. It feels like sometimes when, actually it's happened every single time that I picked them. Every time that I've picked Colorado, they lost, which was Nebraska, which was Kansas State, but they get the job done. They played against a really weak defense, and they took complete advantage of them. That is what great football teams do. You pick up huge chunk plays, you dominate, you kick the crap out of them. That is what you do if you want to reach the playoff, if you want to win the Big 12 title game. They are in a really strong position here where they're not getting enough credit. Where I think a lot of people overlook and a lot of people that aren't watching these freaking football games are going to just completely miss is that their defensive line is the best in the Big 12. That they are able to create some serious disruptive pressures, force turnovers, get backbreaking sacks that end drives. They had 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. And if it wasn't for the fact that they were running light boxes in the second half, assuming that Texas Tech was going to throw the ball more, Taj Brooks probably would not have had the 137 rushing yards that he did because they bottled him up completely in the first half. They played really freaking good. I'm in on this Colorado team. They finished the year strong. There's no reason that they can't be in the playoff.
All right. I think we need to have 2 conversation pieces. Number 1, who is Colorado from a national perspective? And then number 2, who is Colorado in the Big 12? Because you're right. They are a contender in the Big 12. Nationally, that's a different story. And I don't know which one you want to have, but we could have both. In reference to the game, you're right. D-line had 7 sacks. Morton was under pressure all night long. He took a lot of big hits. Steele was in there and delivered some really good passes. And look, Joe, this game was close, okay? It was a 7-point game with 1 minute and 9 seconds left to go, and then they had the fumble and scoop and score with Shiloh, and that was the ball game. The thing was, though, I'm with you on the sacks. I know that they can actually get after a quarterback. In the second half, Taj Brooks got moving, as you mentioned. So it's a great win. And look, Texas Tech did the same thing to Iowa State, who we thought was going to win the Big 12 last week. But here's the difference with Colorado. They have athletes on the outside, and they have athletes all over the place. That the reason they're able to beat Texas Tech and Iowa State couldn't is because one team had better athletes than the other. One had more dudes. And when they needed a big play, they kept coming up in the fold. Shedeur, I thought, was okay in moments. I thought he was elite in others. 4 total touchdowns, 291 yards. The issue is, Joe, with me, I still worry about them not being able to run the football effectively, offensively.
That did kind of come up for me too, and that's like the only – like every team is going to have a negative takeaway that you have to acknowledge. And like no team is perfect, and I think that like if we're being fair in judgment, we need to bring that up because 60 total rushing yards, 32 rushing yards for Augusta against one of the worst run defenses in the country. Does this style of play work in the Big 12? 100%. You're not going up against teams that have the athletes to keep up with your athletes when you're throwing the football the way that you are. But if you do get to the playoff, like you were just about to bring up, and I didn't mean to jump on you here, if they go up against a team like Indiana or Penn State or Ohio State, or if they square off with Georgia or Tennessee, you got to be able to, if there's a 3rd and 2, you're not going to be able to throw on 3rd and 2. Like you got to be able to line up, run the ball up the middle. Like there are going to be spots where you're going to need to do that.
Oh, buddy, they can't do that. I mean, look, Big 12, look, they're more than a bowl team. They're a contender. Here's a conversation we really should be having. I mean, Joe, we're having a conversation about Colorado going to a playoff right now. Mm-hmm. Like, that is in pure insanity. So he took a 1-win team, and now we're talking about
amazing accomplishment.
Playoff conversations.
Yeah.
In reference to yesterday, I thought that they were so streaky. And this is how I feel about Colorado when I watch their games. I thought yesterday's game put their season in a bow offensively. Joe, they started the game out 4 straight possessions and had punts, had to settle the punt. Then they go touchdown, field goal, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. And that's how they were really strictly. They were going off midway through that game. And I'm like, man, at some point they're going to continue to separate here. Joe, you talk about this all the time. Great teams find ways to win. Joe, when they could not get anything moving offensively, at the end they had a punt. Then they got the scoop and score to end it. Mm-hmm. Defense came up with a big play. And we would have never said that about Colorado a year ago, that their defense is coming away with a big play the way that they did. Look, man, I like them. I think that they could be one of the better teams in the Big 12. BYU almost got clipped, right? Like, I mean, BYU showed some vulnerabilities there. But here's the thing, man. You want a real test about how physical a team is and how good you can be? Well, you got one this week, and Utah's going to be pissed off. Utah's going to be very pissed off. So you're going to learn a lot more about this team, too, in Colorado next week against Utah.
Utah is going to be a really good tone setter, because I think if you beat Utah and you beat them handedly, because like you're talking about, like they're going to try and win on the line of scrimmage. And if you're able to just completely blow past them, that's a huge confidence builder. But you just brought up BYU. I don't think that BYU can beat Colorado. I don't. This BYU team, man, is winning by they are winning by luck. Like they are one of those teams that like things just keep going their way. And I mean, as much as you
found a way to win a rivalry game, we can't do this to
I'm
BYU.
I'm not discounting it, but like just like you've brought up with Miami, when you're winning a lot of these close games, that runs out at a certain point. Maybe it ends up being way later on, and I'm jumping the gun a little bit here.
But Joe, they got to lose 2 games to be out of that conversation now. Because even if they lose 2 conference games, they're still in the conversation of all of this. So again, I get what you're saying, but
I'm saying that Colorado can beat them. Colorado can beat them for the
Big
12 championship game.
Colorado has the athletes to beat anybody in the Big 12 and go to a playoff.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. All right. As we wrap it up here, Joe, let's get to Texas first, and then we'll rack up Week 11. Texas absolutely abuses Florida yesterday. Here's what I'm going to say. The worst thing that could have happened to Florida happened yesterday. You announce that you're keeping Billy Napier, and you turn right around and get your shit beat in. Now, I don't know what we should have expected because DJ Lagway did not play. But I don't know if Billy got saved because of the issues that's going on with their men's basketball coach. I don't know what's going on at the University of Florida. But here's what I do know.
It's a joke. That was the title of the video. It was a joke. But sorry, continue what you were saying.
Here's what I do know. I saw a team that was really deflated. I saw a team that thought that they had no hope. And, man, Texas took it to them.
One would have thought the announcement of your head coach returning would mean guys in the locker room, week of practice. We're going to come out. We're going to play a really hard-fought battle. And a lot of people, including us, gave them some credit for the Georgia performance. And, we're saying that, hey, their defense, they've got some good players. Their offensive line, they've got some good players. Their run game, they can move the ball. This was pathetic. Like, this is the furthest degree of pathetic that we could have seen. This was one of the worst games that anybody in the SEC has put out this year, minus the Mississippi State loss to Toledo. Like this is not SEC football. It was like watching a back-end Big 12 team. It was like watching Houston try to play a football game against Texas. And I don't want to take anything away from Texas here, by the way. This is the version, and it's another one of those games. There were a lot of these this week that we didn't even really get to, where teams got chances to like really, really splatter an opponent and play their best football. That version of Texas is the version of Texas that can win the SEC. But that freaking version of Texas does not show up every single week, and that is why we have been critical of them. There have been we've got some Texas listeners. I see you guys hopping in the chat, and I appreciate you guys' support of the show. But Sark's got to show up and show that product more often. 100 yards from Jarek Gibson. Trey Wisner had that huge reception that he had. Isaiah Bond had the big splash touchdown that he had. You had so many different guys getting opportunities to produce, and Quinn Ewers was the most efficient we've ever seen him. Like, why can't they do this every single week? That's what I keep coming down to. Maybe that's me being negative on a positive.
Twice too. That's the crazy part. Quinn, everybody's like, he was the elite yesterday. I'm like, bro, I watched that entire game from start to finish. He still almost threw 2 picks.
Man, you love to find a way to.
I'm just saying, like, when I think of elite, I don't think of like what I just saw. You get what I'm saying? Here's the thing that I love with Texas yesterday. Look, it's not like Florida's defensive line couldn't get after the quarterback. Yeah, you held on. I mean, you looked good. Joe, they finally found a way to run the football. Now, I've told you about Florida, Florida's DC and how he always lets teams run all over him. You did exactly what you needed to do. And you know what? You do get a big check mark for doing exactly what you need to do. It's a good check mark. You went out, you dominated an opponent. You had been playing around. But no, I see this game differently, Joe. I don't care who the opponent was. You're right. The University of Texas showed who they can be yesterday. Do they got to prove that they can continue to do it? You're right. Yeah, that's sure. Cannot deny that. Here's what I do know, though. What I know about this Texas team is if they have the focus, the sheer focus of what they did yesterday, you're right. They can win the SEC. I also agree with you. And a massive however, I don't know if that happens every week. Joe, what I would say too that I would just want to touch on, how much am I like, what am I doing with Florida here? I mean, you got a walk-on quarterback from Yale. I mean, like, what do you want me to do?
I pointed this out, and I had a couple people that when I tweeted this were like, well, like, what else do you expect? Like, who's supposed to have a good third stringer? Why is that your third string quarterback? Like most programs, not all of them are going to be like Oregon or like Georgia that stockpile all these guys that were 4 and 5 stars. But you're Florida. You would think that they would have like a lineage of guys, like a couple of guys that were there. Why did you have to go in the offseason to get a walk-on who was a backup at Yale?
Yeah, but in fairness, Joe, we're not expecting for you to be get at 3. Like, let's just be real. This rarely happens.
I understand that, and I totally get that. At least, like,
Florida State last year didn't even have a 2.
That's well, Brock Glenn.
No, they didn't.
Brock Glenn's better than
the 2s are
Warner
playing right now. Look how bad they are. We're about to talk about Florida State next. Look how bad they are.
That whole team is bad. That whole team is bad.
No, if you're any team and you're getting your third string quarterback, it's going to be a problem. Just be real.
I understand that, but like, how can you not have like something? Florida State puts Kromenhoek or Kromenhoek, I forgot how you pronounce his name. At least he's like they're trying to get him the ball and let him be an athlete and run around and stuff.
And like, I don't know. Florida, though, what do you, to the point, what do you want me to take from this? They can't score. And so they punt the ball away. Joe, think about this. Florida's defense was on the field for 3 possessions in 5 minutes of game time. So the beginning of the game when they're kind of stalling Texas, okay, because they were kind of stalling him. They were kind of giving him some problems early, right? I mean, the first quarter, whatever. Then all of a sudden I turn up and looking like, wait a minute. They literally had 3 straight 3-and-outs and didn't get plus a minute in time of possession. What's Florida? Like, what are we doing? And here's another thing. This is what pisses me off about Florida, and especially about Billy. Joe, they're down like, what was it, 28 or 35? They kicked a field goal from the 4-yard line. A field goal. Well, when you're down that much, that is so bad, dude.
This is my whole point, is that like you would have expected at least a little bit more competitiveness.
You got to the 4-yard line.
I know, but there's none of that. There was none. There was 0.
Oh, what if you get shut out? It doesn't change anything.
They're just we said this on Thursday when we taped that segment.
God,
it's a joke of a football program. Speaking of a joke of a football program, we got to talk about Florida State.
All right. So, Joe, it was announced today that Mike Norvell's making a move. There was some scuttlebutt earlier this morning that maybe it was him that was getting fired. It wasn't. Florida State has made a move. They're firing pretty much their entire offensive staff here, Joe.
Well, so this article from 2 hours ago on The Athletic, it says that they're firing Alex Atkins, Adam Fuller, and Ron Duggins, who's their wide receivers coach. So that's their OC, their DC, and their wide receivers coach that they're getting rid of. I don't think anyone's really surprised. This team's god awful. Anyone who watched, like me, like a total nut job, watched that Notre Dame Florida State game, and I wish you could get your time back, and I wish I could have gotten my time back, knows that this team has no life. It's got zero energy. It is insane to realize that we at one point were talking about nationally as both of those coordinators as top coordinators at their respective positions, and this is the result that we're at right now, where they've got one win and they're getting fired. The next biggest question is Mike Norvell next? And I don't know if it's feasibly possible for them to fire him, because the buyout is probably going to be so freaking huge. I don't know where the hell they go from here. There's never been this big of a drop-off. This is insane how bad they are.
Better come to a settlement.
Did Ed O get an extension after the national championship? That's the first thing that popped in mind. So what did they do to get rid of him?
They came to a settlement.
Okay.
He didn't take the whole thing, but he gave a hometown discount too.
So he willingly left.
But here's the problem. They had a lot of shit on Ed. You know, the blondes, the titty pictures with blondes, and they had a lot on Ed. I don't know if they have a lot on Norvell. So, to the point of all this, Joe, this has got to go on Norvell. I mean, you run this ship. You are the one that made your team and program go in the direction of going in the portal. It's how you built it. So you can blame Alex Atkins, you can blame Adam, you can blame anybody. No, you decided to do that. You decided to do that. And you went in the portal and you had tons of success, but these portal kids, they don't want to play for you. They're not kids that have a culture here and love Florida State. And it's killing you. And Joe, here's the truth. At a place like Florida State, Mike Norvell should be fired. The only reason he's not is because there's a massive buyout. And now Florida State is stuck. But listen to me and listen to me well. Florida State fans are about to kill me on this. But you know how I feel about them right now is a little bit like, this is karma coming back on your ass for all the shit you did to the ACC. This is karma.
Well, I think that they know that. I think that they understand that this is 100%
you get what I'm
karma.
saying?
Yeah, no. I think
it's karma. And so now you're in a place, and listen, for the fans, I really hate this. Like, we're really good friends with TJ Pittenger. Mm-hmm. Fantastic college football show, by the way. Y'all need to go check it out. I hate it for him. But man, this feels like karma coming back on your ass. So I know they're firing guys. The truth be told, I mean, are you willing to do this again? Joe, are you expecting this to get better? Because they got to go in the portal again now. Now they got to go back into the portal.
That's my whole point here is like, how does this thing transform? Because like, at least we were critical of Brian Kelly and we talked about all that. And you at least look at the bright future that could be.
But he's not 1-9. Right.
Right. He's not 1-9. And he also, if he was 1-9, one could argue, hey, he's got a bunch.
Oh, buddy.
Right. Okay. But what I'm trying to say is that Mike Norvell does not have a good recruiting base in high school recruiting that he can turn to. They've lived and died off of the portal. The mentality of the roster summed up with, I think it was Patrick Payton who hopped in the portal and then left the portal to return to the team in an effort to strong arm them into giving him more money. They don't have guys that are bought into the program right now. They don't have guys that came in as high schoolers that wanted to be there. I don't know how you find that and fix that in a season. And I don't know what it's going to take or change to get rid of him in a short period of time. It's probably going to be extremely difficult. I don't think that there is the main point here. There's no way to fix this. There's none. Mike Norvell is staring down a massive wall that he has to figure out how to get through.
Oh, but you know what wall it is? Remember Game of Thrones? Remember the ice wall?
I think I want to watch Game of Thrones.
Okay, well, Joe.
I've told you this 100 times.
Okay. That's how big the wall is. Buddy, I don't think it's fixable. I really don't. Because he's got to go back in the portal now. Yeah. Now, the only way it's fixable is if you get guys that come in here and you hit on the portal again. But to sustain this, you better start getting to high school recruiting. And by the way, Joe, they're losing dudes. CJ Wiley flipped. I think a quarterback flipped. I mean,
and I don't blame him. They shouldn't want to freaking go play for him.
This is as bad as it can be. Let's make something very clear.
You're bad. The product on the field sucks, and kids are decommitting.
I don't know how you can't look at Norvell and say, like, hey, man, we're going to find a loophole in here. We're going to give you $20 million and you're out. Like, do what you got to do, but you're out. So they're not going to win another football game, I don't think. I really don't know. I don't know their schedule. Maybe they have an FCS opponent, but geez Louise, man. Geez Louise.
Let's see really quickly. What do they have?
They have an FCS team this week.
They have Charleston Southern.
All right, hold on.
They've got Charleston Southern. They've got
Charleston Southern and the points this week.
They have they have a bye week, then Charleston Southern. So they're off this week. They've got Charleston Southern.
I'm taking the bye week versus Florida State this week.
And then they've got Florida to wrap the season. That's the worst football game ever. We get to watch Brock Glenn.
You know what's likely going to happen?
What?
Because Lagway's probably going to be back by that point because it's a hamstring. They're going to dominate the shit out of Florida State.
That's a good point.
Bro, can you imagine? Florida's that bad and comes in and dominates you. And what if Florida has to get a win to be bowl eligible? Oh my God!
I'm rooting for Florida State in that situation because that would be chaotic and ridiculous if they lose out because in the second win or third win for Florida State.
Remind me next week to take Charleston Southern in the points. All right.
Okay.
Any other things you want to wrap up here before we get out?
No, week 12. Things are getting hairier and more competitive.
Georgia just had an awful game. We talk about them tomorrow. Georgia and Tennessee headlines the ticket. We'll see y'all tomorrow, man. Y'all have a good one. Peace.